Good morning. You are joining us for the official intelligence briefing for the 18th of May, 2026.
Good morning to you.
Today, we are conducting a rigorous deep dive into the rapidly shifting geopolitical landscape of East Asia. Specifically, we will be focusing on the region of North Korea.
Yes, and we will be analyzing these recent actions guided strictly by verifiable intelligence estimates.
Exactly. We are looking at satellite imagery and official diplomatic communications gathered over the past 2 weeks.
All evaluated with strict impartiality, maintaining a highly objective, fact-driven approach.
Indeed. Now, before we unpack this intelligence, we will state that this briefing is sponsored by ProWave AI.
Right.
And the data compiled for our analysis today is generated by Stylo News, which is the premier AI-powered news application.
And it is worth providing some context on that for our listener.
Absolutely. The Stylo News app that you have access to is actually the consumer version of the Stylo Intel Ops software.
Which is an enterprise system.
Yes, it is currently utilized for highly complex operations across government, military, and international business sectors.
So this provides you with direct access to the very same analytical tools designed to support global decision makers.
Precisely. You are getting the high-stakes intelligence treatment.
Right.
Now, our official briefing today is titled North Korean Nuclear Doctrine, Russia Ties, and Rising Regional Tensions.
A very complex set of topics.
It is. The mission of this deep dive is to objectively report on the primary patterns of events in North Korea, mapping out the local, national, and international impacts.
We will neutrally examine the perspectives of key global decision makers, as well as social media sentiment.
Right. And based purely on the intelligence estimates, we will propose possible courses of action entirely free of any political bias.
So let us begin with the foundation of Pyongyang's recent maneuvers.
Yes. To understand the physical weapons being deployed right now, we first have to understand the legal and philosophical shift that occurred recently.
Right, the constitutional amendments.
Exactly. The Supreme People's Assembly passed amendments that completely redefine the nature of the Korean Peninsula.
The intelligence confirms two highly consequential legal changes.
The first one is staggering. We are seeing the formal removal of all constitutional language referring to Korean reunification.
Yes. The regime has officially adopted a two hostile states doctrine.
Which means they are formally defining South Korea not as estranged brethren, but, well, as a separate primary adversary.
That is a massive ideological shift. For decades, reunification was the official, publicly stated goal.
Even if it was mostly rhetoric, abandoning it entirely feels like a calculated strategic choice.
Right. It is not just a change in vocabulary. If South Koreans are no longer classified as, your own people, it removes a significant psychological barrier to targeting them.
That aligns precisely with the intelligence assessments. And it clears the legal runway for the second, far more critical amendment.
The codification of the automatic nuclear retaliation policy.
Also known as the dead man switch.
Exactly. This legally mandates an automatic and immediate nuclear strike if the leader, Kim Jong-un, is killed or incapacitated.
Or crucially, if the national command and control system is threatened by hostile forces.
The context behind why this is happening right now is absolutely vital.
It is. The sources indicate this constitutional revision follows the recent United States and Israeli military operation.
The operation that resulted in the death of Iran's supreme leader, Ali Khamenei.
Right. Watching that unfold seems to have profoundly heightened Pyongyang's fears of leadership decapitation strikes.
By legally delegating nuclear launch authority in the event of the leadership's demise, they are demonstrating a direct strategic response to perceived vulnerabilities.
They're looking at the precision of modern drone strikes and bunker-penetrating munitions and countering that technology with a rigid policy.
It mirrors the Soviet-era dead hand system. It shifts from a posture of purely centralized authority to an automated state-level policy.
Think of this like a tripwire attached to a defensive perimeter.
That is an apt analogy.
Once you string that wire across the path, you've completely taken human hesitation out of the equation.
Right. You don't have to decide to detonate the explosive.
Exactly. The adversary makes the choice for you the second they cross the line. By writing this tripwire into their constitution, Pyongyang is attempting to project absolute deterrence.
And what that tripwire does at a national level is drastically reduce the decision time during a crisis scenario.
It institutionalizes regime survival over diplomatic flexibility.
However, we must emphasize that the intelligence community assesses this primarily as a defensive deterrent posture.
Right. It is a shield, not necessarily a sword,
Precisely. It does not in itself indicate a precursor to an unprovoked attack.
but a constitutional tripwire is only effective if there are actual explosives attached to it.
Which brings us to the physical escalation.
Yes. Let's look at how North Korea is arming itself to back up this new doctrine. The intelligence reveals a clear pattern of tactical escalation.
Satellite imagery and monitoring agencies confirm significant upgrades to the Pyongyang uranium refinery.
And that facility is vital for producing yellowcake, correct?
Yes. Yellowcake is the concentrated uranium powder that serves as a crucial intermediate step in creating weapons-grade material.
And what are the current estimates on their stockpile?
Current estimates place North Korea's functional arsenal at approximately 50 to 60 nuclear warheads.
That is substantial. And beyond the nuclear program, we are tracking major movements in conventional artillery.
Yes, specifically the new 155mm self-propelled howitzers.
Which are slated for deployment to the southern border by the end of 2026.
The technical specifications of these weapons note a firing range exceeding 60 kilometers.
Which is deeply concerning when you consider the geography.
Right. The South Korean capital of Seoul is merely 56 kilometers from the demilitarized zone.
So they're well within range. They don't need advanced ballistic missiles to threaten a metropolitan area of almost 10 million people.
Exactly. These conventional artillery systems pose an immediate threat, functioning as a constant strategic hostage situation.
Now, wait, let me look at this naval data because this really stands out.
The new destroyer.
Yes, the intelligence reports the launch and inspection of a 5,000-ton nuclear-capable destroyer, the Choi Hyun.
It is significant development.
But we are talking about a nation with severe resource constraints. Does a vessel like this actually shift the strategic balance, or is it just propaganda?
Well, a single surface vessel of that size is indeed vulnerable to Allied anti-ship capabilities.
It would be tracked easily in a conflict.
True. However, its strategic value lies in diversification. It is designed to carry nuclear-armed cruise missiles.
Moving their delivery systems to maritime platforms.
Exactly. Even if it is vulnerable in a full-scale war in peacetime, it forces the United States and South Korea to dedicate immense naval resources to track it.
We're also monitoring recent ballistic missile tests, specifically those launched with extremely steep trajectories.
Yes, lofted trajectories splashing down in the waters between Korea and Japan.
But let's push back on this for a moment and look at it objectively, to avoid any alarmist interpretations.
A vital part of our mission.
Despite the border howitzers, the steep trajectory tests, and this new destroyer, the intelligence shows no signs of mass force mobilization.
Right. None at all.
If a nation is preparing for actual war, you would see logistics surges, large-scale ground force repositioning, reserve call-ups.
Blood bank mobilizations.
Exactly. And we were seeing none of that. So what is the actual threat profile?
The local and national impact is characterized entirely by gray zone pressure and coercive signaling.
Not full-scale war.
Correct. Gray zone actions fall just short of actual acts of war. They are designed to test the adversary without triggering a full military response.
Like the steep trajectory missile test.
Precisely. It demonstrates range potential while carefully preserving escalation control by landing in international waters.
And South Korea's response reflects this. They aren't mobilizing armor divisions. They are focusing heavily on drone defense and capital readiness.
Which confirms they anticipate limited provocations rather than an imminent invasion.
But modernizing a military on this scale, running uranium refineries, deploying destroyers, that requires massive capital.
And for a heavily sanctioned country, that funding has to come from an external source.
Which brings us to the deepening ties with Moscow. The visual evidence from May the 9th was striking.
Yes, North Korean troops marching in Russia's Victory Day parade in Moscow.
The first time in history. But it's far more than a ceremonial photo opportunity.
Intelligence reports estimate that 14,000 to 15,000 North Korean troops are currently deployed to support Russian military operations in Ukraine.
That is a staggering number of personnel.
Alongside massive, continuous artillery ammunition supplies.
And the economic windfall from this is massive. Intelligence suggests North Korea has generated up to $13 to $14 billion from this cooperation.
Which amounts to nearly half of the country's entire gross domestic product.
Half of their GDP. So let me ask you this. How does an influx of $14 billion fundamentally change Pyongyang's reliance on traditional partners, like China?
It creates a massive paradigm shift.
Because it completely neutralizes their vulnerability to international sanctions, right?
Exactly. This relationship has moved from a transactional arms deal to a structural alliance.
Russia gains critical manpower and munitions.
And North Korea secures hard currency. But more dangerously, they potentially gain access to advanced military technologies.
Right. There's the matter of the Ursa Major incident.
Yes, a Russian cargo ship that mysteriously sank in the Mediterranean Sea.
And intelligence sources report it was carrying nuclear reactor components intended for North Korea's submarine program.
Which challenges global non-proliferation architectures directly. This economic independence allows North Korea to act with unprecedented autonomy from Beijing.
So having outlined the actions in these new alliances, let's look at how global decision-makers are responding.
Starting with South Korea.
Right. They are adopting what is being termed a peace remodeling strategy.
It is a highly pragmatic approach. They are emphasizing stability, escalation control, and peaceful coexistence over immediate demands for denuclearization.
Meanwhile, the United States is facing a severe strategic dilemma.
Washington has to balance resource allocation between the Middle East, particularly Iran, and maintaining deterrence in East Asia.
You simply cannot stretch naval assets and military commitments everywhere at once.
No, you cannot. And Russia and China are navigating this differently.
Russia is directly relying on North Korea now.
While China maintains a very careful diplomatic balance, they seek regional stability, but they aren't abandoning Pyongyang.
It's a fractured global response. During the recent 11th NPT review conference, the European Union and South Korea demanded complete denuclearization.
But the United Nations Security Council remains divided and unable to act.
Now let's look at public sentiment. Discussions monitored on the social media platform X reveal a public that is surprisingly pragmatic.
Yes, the sentiment is largely resigned to North Korea's nuclear entrenchment.
People favor strategic realism over moral outrage. They are focusing on the actual mechanics of this new dead man switch rather than panicking.
It is an objective assessment of the reality on the ground.
It is actually fascinating that the social media sentiment closely mirrors South Korea's official pragmatic stance.
Both the public and the policymakers seem to be shifting toward managing the situation rather than trying to magically reverse it.
Synthesizing these perspectives, it seems that global consensus is completely fracturing.
Yes, making coordinated diplomatic action incredibly difficult, if not impossible.
Which brings us to the final analytical segment of our briefing. Based on these facts, what courses of action are being proposed?
Well, in terms of future indicators to watch for, expect the operational deployment of the Choi Hein destroyer by mid-June 2026.
And the continued rollout of the 155mm howitzers along the DMZ through late 2026.
We also assess a high likelihood of continued limited provocations.
Drone incursions, cyber operations.
Exactly. Actions that impose political effects without crossing into war.
So, if military intervention is too risky because of the automatic nuclear retaliation policy, and sanctions are being entirely bypassed with Russian funds, what courses of action are realistically left for the international community?
The intelligence outlines that the most likely courses of action moving forward involve tension reduction.
Establishing reliable crisis communication channels.
Yes, to prevent accidental escalation. The framework is shifting from a pure denuclearization mandate to one of mutual deterrence and stability management.
It is a profound shift in global strategy.
Indeed. And I will leave you with a final thought to mull over, based on this intelligence.
Please do.
If the global community officially shifts its goal from denuclearizing North Korea to merely containing it,
Right.
does that fundamentally rewrite the playbook for how the world will respond to the next country that attempts to build a nuclear arsenal?
That is an incredibly sobering question, and a vital one. And that concludes our formal intelligence briefing for today. Let's step away from the anchor desk for a moment. Thank you so much for listening to this deep dive.
Yes, thank you for joining us.
You know, the geopolitical landscape is shifting incredibly fast, and making sense of all this noise isn't easy. But that's exactly why we're here.
Absolutely.
If you want to stay ahead of the curve and get insights like this every day, I highly recommend checking out the Stylo News platform.
It's an amazing tool.
It really is. It's a mobile and computer app that you can download to customize your own personal intelligence-style briefs. It pulls from hundreds of traditional news sources and X, synthesizing massive amounts of information into clear, actionable facts, exactly like we did today.
Right, so you get the full picture.
Exactly. You can subscribe and get AI-powered news on demand right now at www.stylonews.com.
We always love putting these deep dives together for you.
We really do. So if there's a specific topic, a region, or a breaking story you want us to unpack next, please reach out and request it.
We'd love to hear from you.
And don't forget to follow Stylo News on your favorite social media platforms to keep the conversation going. We'll leave you to think about that thought on the Nuclear Playbook. Stay curious, stay informed, and we will see you on the next deep dive.